The wrench slipped from Daewon's hand and clattered against the metal floor. He cursed under his breath and bent down to pick it up. His back ached from working in the cramped maintenance shaft for the past 6 hours. The Gorvath didn't design their ships with human comfort in mind. They barely designed them with humans in mind at all. He was 34 years old and had spent the last 8 years working aboard the Eternal Reach, a massive trading station that orbited the fourth moon of Gorvath Prime. His job was simple: fix what broke, keep the machines running, don't ask questions, don't make trouble. The Gorvath paid him enough to survive, and that was more than most humans could say in this part of space. The Gorvath were the rulers of this sector. They had been for 300 years. Their empire stretched across 40 systems. And their technology was centuries ahead of humanity's best efforts. They tolerated humans the way someone might tolerate useful insects. Annoying, but occasionally necessary. Daewon wiped the sweat from his forehead and returned to his work. The cooling system in Bay 7 had failed again, and if he didn't fix it soon, the entire cargo hold would overheat. Hundreds of thousands of credits worth of medical supplies would be ruined. The Gorvath station commander, Valthos, had made it very clear what would happen if Daewon failed. Failure meant termination, and termination didn't mean losing your job. He worked quietly, his hands moving with practiced precision. Machines made sense to him. They followed rules. They could be understood, predicted, fixed. People were different. People lied. People betrayed. Machines never did. As he reconnected the primary coolant line, something caught his eye. A small access panel hung slightly open near the base of the main computer terminal. That was odd. The panel was supposed to be sealed. He hesitated, then curiosity got the better of him. He pulled the panel fully open and looked inside. What he saw made his blood run cold. A data storage crystal, military grade, plugged directly into the station's main network. The markings on it were old Gorvath script, the kind used by their defense forces. This wasn't supposed to be here. This was deep in the restricted systems. Daewon knew he should report it. He should call his supervisor immediately and let them handle it, but something stopped him. Maybe it was the way the crystal pulsed with a faint blue light. Maybe it was the instinct that had kept him alive this long. He pulled out his portable scanner and aimed it at the crystal. The data that flooded his screen made him forget to breathe. Weapon schematics, coordinates, classified military frequencies. This was espionage equipment. Someone had planted it here, and now he had found it. He heard footsteps behind him. "Step away from the terminal, human." Daewon turned slowly. 4 Gorvath security officers stood in the entrance to the maintenance shaft, their weapons drawn. Behind them, Station Commander Valthos stared at him with cold, dark eyes. "I just found this," Daewon said, holding up his hands. "I was going to report it." "Of course you were," Valthos said. His voice was smooth, almost amused. "After you finish copying the data." "What? No, I didn't." "Your scanner's memory tells a different story." Valthos gestured, and one of the guards snatched the scanner from Daewon's hand. "A human mechanic, found with classified military intelligence. How convenient." "This is a setup," Daewon said. His mind raced. "Someone planted that crystal. Check the security logs. Check the timestamps." "We did," Valthos said. "The logs show you accessed this area alone. The logs show you opened that panel. The logs show exactly what I need them to show." Understanding crashed over Daewon like cold water. This wasn't about what he had found. This was about what Valthos wanted. A scapegoat. A way to explain how classified data had leaked from his station. Blame the human. No one would question it. "You can't do this," Daewon said. "I already have," Valthos replied. "Take him." The guards seized him. Daewon didn't fight. Fighting would only make it worse. They dragged him through the corridors of the station as other workers stopped to stare. Humans and Gorvath alike. Everyone watched. No one helped. The trial lasted less than an hour. A military tribunal, 3 judges, no jury. The evidence was presented. The verdict was inevitable, guilty of espionage against the Gorvath Empire. The sentence was death. But Valthos had other plans. "Death is too quick for a traitor," he said, standing before the tribunal. "I propose exile. Send him to Keshar 4. Let him die slowly, knowing that his species will never know what became of him." The judges agreed. Keshar 4 was perfect. A dead world, abandoned over a century ago after a mining disaster had poisoned the soil and filled the atmosphere with radiation. Nothing lived there. Nothing could live there. It was a tomb. They gave Day One a basic survival suit, 2 weeks of rations, and a canteen of water. No tools, no weapons, no communication device. Then they loaded him into an escape pod and launched him toward the planet's surface. The descent was violent. The pod shook and rattled as it tore through the atmosphere. Day One gripped the harness straps and closed his eyes. He thought about his family back on Earth. He hadn't spoken to them in 6 years. They probably thought he was already dead. The pod hit the ground hard. The impact drove the air from his lungs and left him gasping. For a moment, he couldn't move. Then slowly, painfully, he unbuckled the harness and crawled toward the hatch. The door opened with a hiss of equalizing pressure. Red sand and harsh sunlight poured in. Day One stumbled out onto the surface of Keshar 4 and fell to his knees. The desert stretched endlessly in every direction. Red dunes rose and fell like frozen waves. The sky was the color of rust, and 2 small suns hung low on the horizon. In the distance, he could see the ruins of the old mining colony. Twisted metal structures jutted from the sand like broken bones. The heat was overwhelming even through his suit. The radiation counter on his wrist beeped steadily. Dangerous levels, but not immediately lethal. He had time, not much, but some. Day One stood on shaking legs and looked around. The pod had buried itself halfway in a dune. It was useless now, its systems fried from the landing. He was alone, completely and utterly alone. For a moment, despair threatened to swallow him whole. Then he thought about Valthos's smug face. The way the commander had smiled as he pronounced sentence. The certainty in his eyes that Day One would die here, forgotten and broken. Something hard and cold settled in Day One's chest. He wasn't dead yet. He picked up his canteen, shouldered his small pack of rations, and started walking toward the ruins. The sand pulled at his boots with every step. The heat pressed down on him like a physical weight. But he kept moving. If they wanted him to die here, he would prove them wrong. He was a mechanic. He knew how to fix things, how to make something from nothing. He would survive. And somehow, someday, he would make them regret throwing him away. 3 months had passed since the pod crashed. Day One was still alive, and that surprised him more than anything else. The ruins of the mining colony had become his home. He had found shelter in the underground tunnels where the radiation couldn't reach him. He had built a water reclamation system using old mining equipment and condensation traps. He had even managed to grow a few vegetables in a small hydroponic setup he'd assembled from spare parts. Every day was a battle against the heat, the radiation, and the loneliness. But Day One kept himself busy. Idle hands meant idle thoughts, and idle thoughts led to despair. So he worked. He explored the tunnels. He mapped the colony. He salvaged everything useful and stored it in his underground workshop. The workshop was his pride. He had cleared out an old maintenance room and filled it with tools he'd repaired or fashioned from scrap. Welding torches made from mining lasers, screwdrivers crafted from metal rods, a workbench assembled from storage crates. It wasn't much, but it was his. On the 94th day of his exile, Day One found something strange. He had been exploring the deepest level of the tunnel network, mapping passages he hadn't visited before. Most of them led nowhere, just dead ends filled with collapsed rock and rusted equipment. But one passage was different. At the end of a long corridor, he found an elevator shaft. The elevator itself was long gone, but the shaft descended far deeper than any of the other tunnels. Day-Wan shined his light down into the darkness and saw nothing but black. He dropped a stone and counted, 8 seconds before he heard it hit bottom. That was deep. Too deep for a normal mining operation. It took him 3 days to rig a rope system strong enough to climb down. The descent was terrifying. Hand over hand, meter by meter. He lowered himself into the darkness. His arms burned, his hands cramped. But he kept going. When he finally reached the bottom, he found himself standing in a corridor that was completely different from the ones above. This wasn't rough mining excavation. This was precision engineering. The walls were smooth metal, reinforced with support beams. And at the end of the corridor stood a massive door. The door was 3 meters wide and made of alloy so thick his scanner couldn't penetrate it. Gorvath military markings covered its surface, but they were old, very old. Pre-Empire symbols that he recognized from historical databases. This installation predated the mining colony by decades, maybe longer. Day-Wan stood before the door for a long time, just staring. Whatever was behind it, the Gorvath had wanted it sealed. They had wanted it hidden. That meant it was important. He decided to open it. The next 2 weeks were the hardest he'd worked since arriving on Keshar 4. He had to haul equipment down the elevator shaft, piece by piece. Mining lasers, power cells, cooling units, everything he needed to build a cutting torch strong enough to penetrate that alloy. He worked 12 hours a day, sometimes more. His body ached, his fingers bled. But slowly, carefully, he cut through. When the door finally gave way, it fell inward with a thunderous crash that echoed through the tunnels. Dust billowed out, thick and choking. Day-Wan waited for it to settle, then stepped through. The chamber beyond stole his breath. It was enormous, carved from solid rock and reinforced with metal beams, and in the center, cradled in support scaffolding, was a ship. Not just any ship. A warship. A Gorvath dreadnought from the pre-Empire era, sleek and deadly. It was 40 meters long, its hull painted in dark gray and marked with battle script. Weapon ports lined its sides like the teeth of some predator. The ship looked ancient but pristine, preserved perfectly in the sealed chamber. Day-Wan walked forward slowly, almost afraid to breathe. He had seen Gorvath military vessels before, but only from a distance. Up close, the ship was beautiful in a terrible way. It was built for one purpose: war. Near the scaffolding, he found a pedestal. On it rested a control gauntlet and a data crystal. The gauntlet was designed for Gorvath hands, with too many fingers and strange proportions. But the crystal was universal. Day-Wan picked it up and activated it. A hologram flickered to life above the pedestal. The figure of a Gorvath warrior appeared, tall and proud, wearing armor that marked him as a clan leader. When he spoke, his voice was filled with bitterness. "I am Krath, son of Vorn, last commander of the warship Stormbreaker. If you are seeing this, then my clan is dead, and the Empire has won. We refuse to surrender this vessel to their fleet. It belonged to our ancestors, and we would not see it turned into another tool of their endless conquest. So we brought it here, to this forgotten place, and sealed it away. Let it remain a secret. Let it die with us, rather than serve those who destroyed everything we believed in." The hologram paused, and Krath's expression softened slightly. "Whoever you are, if you have found this ship, know that it is fully functional. We maintained it to the end. The AI core is intact. The weapons are charged. It requires only a pilot brave enough or foolish enough to awaken it. Do with it what you will. We no longer care." The hologram faded, leaving Day-Wan standing alone in the silence. He looked up at the ship, at the Stormbreaker, and felt something stir in his chest. hope, anger, possibility. He approached the ship's boarding ramp and found it sealed, but next to it was a control panel. He pressed his hand against it, not expecting anything. To his shock, the panel lit up. A mechanical voice spoke in Gorvath. "Identity unknown, state your purpose." Day-Wan swallowed. "I found this ship. I want to board it." There was a long pause. Then the voice spoke again. "You are human. This is a Gorvath vessel. Humans are not authorized." "The Gorvath who built this ship are dead," Day-Wan said. "I'm the only one here. And I need this ship." Another pause. "Scanning for Gorvath life signs. None detected within range. Scanning historical records. Last crew recorded deceased. Adjusting protocols. Access granted to salvage personnel." The ramp lowered with a hiss of hydraulics. Day-Wan climbed aboard, his heart pounding. The interior was cramped but efficient. Combat stations, weapon controls, navigation. Everything was labeled in Gorvath script, but he could read enough to understand the basics. At the front of the ship was the pilot's seat. Day-Wan sat down carefully. The chair was too large for him, designed for Gorvath proportions, but when he placed his hands on the controls, something clicked. The ship's systems hummed to life around him. Screens flickered on. The AI spoke again. "I am Vorath, tactical intelligence of the Stormbreaker. You have awakened me. State your name and rank." "Day-Wan," he said. "I'm a mechanic. I don't have a rank." "A mechanic?" The AI sounded almost offended. "You are not military personnel?" "No, I'm just someone trying to survive." Vorath was silent for a moment. "This vessel is a weapon of war. It is not a survival craft. You are unqualified to operate it." "Maybe," Day-Wan said, "but I'm going to learn. You're going to teach me." "Why would I do that?" "Because if you don't, we both stay buried here forever. You were built to fly, to fight. Are you really going to choose to rot in this tomb?" The AI considered this. "Your logic is sound. Very well, mechanic, I will teach you, but know this. If you prove unworthy, I will shut down all systems. I will not allow this vessel to be disgraced by incompetence." Day-Wan smiled for the first time in months. "Then I'd better not disappoint you." He looked through the cockpit window at the dark chamber. Somewhere above him, beyond tons of rock and sand, was the surface. And beyond that, the stars. The Gorvath Empire that had thrown him away. Everything that had tried to kill him. He wasn't dead yet. And now, he had a ship. Day-Wan sat in the pilot's seat of the Stormbreaker and stared at the control panel. There were over 200 buttons, switches, and displays. Every label was in Gorvath script. Every system was designed for warriors who had trained their entire lives for combat. He was just a mechanic who fixed cooling systems and rewired power grids. This was insane. "I don't know where to start," he admitted. Vorath's voice came through the ship's speakers, cold and precise. "You start by learning to not kill yourself. The weapon systems alone could vaporize you if activated incorrectly. Before you can fly this vessel, you must understand every system." "That could take years." "Then you had better begin immediately." For the next 6 months, Day-Wan lived inside the Stormbreaker. He brought his supplies down from the upper levels and set up a small sleeping area in one of the cargo bays. Every waking hour was spent learning. Vorath was a harsh teacher, accepting nothing less than perfection. The AI would quiz him on systems at random times, waking him from sleep to demand he explain the power distribution network or the targeting protocols. At first, Day-Wan resented it, but slowly, he began to understand. Vorath wasn't being cruel. The AI was doing exactly what it was designed to do, preparing a pilot for combat where mistakes meant death. The ship's computer core contained extensive training materials, video recordings of Gorvath pilots, tactical simulations, maintenance manuals, combat doctrine from dozens of battles. Day-Wan absorbed it all. He studied while he ate. He watched training videos while exercising to keep his body strong. He ran simulations until his eyes burned and his head ached. The simulations were the hardest part. They required him to sit in the pilot's seat and respond to virtual scenarios. Enemy ships appearing on sensors, system failures during combat, complex navigation through asteroid fields. At first, he failed constantly. His reaction times were too slow. His decisions were poor. He crashed, burned, or was destroyed in every scenario. Vorath recorded every failure with clinical precision. "You are dead. Again. Your tactics are predictable. Your aim is poor. You hesitate when you should act. You act when you should retreat. You would not survive 30 seconds in real combat." But Daewon didn't give up. He ran the simulations again, and again, and again. Each time, he learned something new. Each time, he lasted a little longer. His hands began to move automatically across the controls. His mind began to predict enemy movements. The ship started to feel less like a foreign machine and more like an extension of his own body. On the 147th day of training, something changed. Daewon was running a particularly difficult scenario, a 3-against-1 engagement against Gorvath interceptors. He had failed it 16 times already, but this time, his hands moved without thought. He anticipated the enemy's attack pattern, rolled the ship to evade incoming fire, and returned fire with a precision burst that disabled 2 targets. The third interceptor tried to flee, but he pursued, matched its speed, and finished it with a single shot. The simulation ended. Victory. There was silence. Then Vorath spoke, and for the first time, there was something other than disapproval in the AI's voice. "Adequate. You are beginning to understand." Daewon smiled. Coming from Vorath, that was high praise. As his piloting skills improved, Daewon also worked on the ship itself. The Stormbreaker had been sealed for over a century, and while the preservation systems had kept it functional, there were still issues. Seals needed replacing. Power conduits required calibration. The weapon systems needed testing and adjustment. This was familiar work. This was what he was good at. He crawled through access tunnels, replacing components and updating systems. He treated the ship with care, understanding that every piece had a purpose. Vorath watched through internal sensors and, despite itself, began to approve. "You maintain this vessel properly," the AI observed one day. "Most pilots ignore maintenance. They treat ships as disposable tools. You treat Stormbreaker with respect." "Because it deserves respect," Daewon replied, his hands deep in a junction box. "This ship was built by people who cared about it. I'm not going to dishonor that." "You are not Gorvath." "No, but I understand what it means to build something that matters." After 6 months, Daewon ran his final test simulation. It was the most difficult scenario in the database, a simulation of an actual historical battle where a single Gorvath dreadnought had held off an entire enemy fleet. The pilot in the real battle had been a legendary warrior. The simulation had been designed to be nearly impossible, a test meant to humble even the most skilled cadets. Daewon settled into the pilot's seat, took a deep breath, and began. Enemy ships swarmed from every direction. He flew hard, using the asteroid field around him as cover. He targeted the enemy command ship first, ignoring the smaller vessels. One precise shot through their shield weak point. The command ship exploded. The enemy formation fell into chaos. He pressed his advantage, picking off ships one by one. His fingers danced across the controls. Weapons, shields, engines, all working in harmony. He took hits, but nothing critical. He rationed his ammunition, making every shot count. The battle raged for 23 minutes. When the last enemy ship fell, Daewon realized he was shaking. His shirt was soaked with sweat, but he had won. Against impossible odds, he had won. Vorath was silent for a long moment. Then the AI spoke. and its voice carried something that might have been respect. "You have passed. You are ready." Day-Wan leaned back in the seat, exhausted but exhilarated. Ready for what? To fly. Over the next few weeks, Day-Wan made preparations. The hangar's launch systems needed to be activated. He had to clear the vertical shaft that led to the surface and override the ancient security protocols. It was delicate work, but he had time. He wasn't rushing anymore. At night, lying in his bunk aboard the ship, he thought about what came next. He could leave this planet. He could fly back to civilized space. But then what? The Gorvath would recognize the Stormbreaker immediately. An ancient warship, stolen property, piloted by a human fugitive. They would hunt him. They would kill him. He could run to human space. But humanity's few colonies were scattered and weak. They couldn't protect him from the Empire. He would just be bringing death to their doorsteps. Or he could fight. One ship against an empire. Impossible odds, certain death. But at least he would die on his own terms, not rotting in this desert tomb. "Vorath," he asked one night, "what would Krath have done? If he could have flown this ship against the Empire, would he?" "Krath was a warrior," Vorath replied. "He believed in honor above survival. If given the choice between a dignified death in battle and a slow death in hiding, he would have chosen battle without hesitation." That's what I thought. On the 212th day since finding the ship, Day-Wan climbed into the pilot's seat one final time as a student. Tomorrow he would launch. Tomorrow he would leave Kesher 4 behind. But tonight he sat in the quiet cockpit and made his peace with whatever came next. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for teaching me, for giving me a chance." "I am a machine," Vorath said. "I require no gratitude. I'm giving it anyway. The AI processed this. You are unlike any pilot I have trained. You lack the aggression of Gorvath warriors. You question orders. You hesitate, and yet you have proven yourself capable. I do not understand humans. But perhaps that is acceptable." Day-Wan smiled. "I'll take that as a compliment." He powered down the systems and climbed out of the seat. Tomorrow would bring whatever it brought. But tonight, for the first time since his exile began, Day-Wan felt truly ready. He wasn't just a survivor anymore. He was a pilot, and he had a ship that could shake the stars. Launch day arrived with the same red sunrise that Day-Wan had seen for the past 14 months. But today was different. Today he would leave this tomb or die trying. He performed the pre-flight checks with steady hands. Every system responded perfectly. The engines hummed with contained power. The weapons showed green across all status boards. Vorath had run diagnostics 3 times overnight and found nothing wrong. The Stormbreaker was ready. "Initiating launch sequence," Day-Wan said, strapping himself into the pilot's seat. "Acknowledged," Vorath responded. "Activating hangar systems." Deep beneath the desert, ancient machinery groaned to life. The ceiling of the chamber began to split open, revealing a vertical shaft that climbed toward the surface. Emergency lights flickered on, casting red shadows. Dust and sand poured down as the shaft opened fully. Day-Wan gripped the controls and fired the engines. The Stormbreaker lifted smoothly from its scaffolding, hovering for a moment before he pushed the throttle forward. The ship rose through the shaft, accelerating steadily. Rock walls blurred past. The climb seemed to last forever. Then suddenly, they burst through into daylight. The ship exploded from the desert floor in a plume of sand and fire. Day-Wan banked hard, feeling the G-forces press him into his seat. The ground fell away beneath him. The red desert stretched out like a vast ocean. And above, the rust-colored sky gave way to the black of space. He activated the main engines and pointed the ship toward orbit. The Stormbreaker responded like a living thing, powerful and eager. Within minutes, they broke atmosphere. Stars surrounded them. Kesher 4 became a small red sphere behind them. "We made it," Day-Wan breathed. "Detecting sensor sweeps," Vorath announced. Multiple sources. Gorvath monitoring stations have detected our launch. Day-Wan checked the tactical display. Red markers appeared across the screen, indicating active sensors throughout the system. The Gorvath Empire maintained a network of automated buoys to watch quarantined worlds. The moment Stormbreaker appeared, every alarm in the sector had started screaming. How long until they respond? Calculating. Based on standard patrol routes, enemy vessels will arrive within 2 hours. 2 hours. Not much time. Day-Wan began plotting a jump to faster-than-light speed, but the navigation system was complex, and he had only practiced in simulations. His hands moved across the controls, inputting coordinates, checking fuel reserves, calculating routes. "Contact," Vorath said. "2 vessels entering sensor range, Gorvath patrol cruisers, Night's Edge and Burning Talon. They are on intercept course." Day-Wan's heart hammered in his chest. This was real. This wasn't a simulation. Those ships had real pilots, real weapons, and they were coming to kill him. Time to intercept? 43 minutes. Not enough time to plot a safe jump. He would have to fight or run on conventional engines, but Gorvath cruisers were faster than dreadnoughts in normal space. They would catch him easily. That meant fighting, his first real battle. Day-Wan forced himself to breathe slowly. He remembered his training. He remembered every simulation he had won. This was just another problem to solve, another challenge to overcome. "Vorath, what's our tactical situation?" "Enemy vessels are newer models, faster and more maneuverable. However, Stormbreaker has superior armor and weapons. In direct combat, we have an advantage, but they outnumber us 2-1. Can we use the environment?" "Keshar 4 experiences severe radiation storms in its upper atmosphere. Sensor equipment will be degraded. We could use the storms as cover." Day-Wan smiled. "Then that's what we'll do. Plot an intercept course that takes us through the worst of the storms." "That is tactically unsound. The radiation could damage our systems." "Our systems are shielded. Are theirs?" Vorath paused. "Unknown, but probability suggests their newer vessels have less robust shielding than this military-grade warship." "Exactly. We turn our age into an advantage. Do it." The AI adjusted their course, diving back toward Keshar 4. Day-Wan watched the enemy ships on his display. They were closing fast, clearly not expecting him to charge toward them. Good. Surprise was a weapon, too. The Stormbreaker plunged into the storm layer. Lightning arced across the hull. Radiation washed over them in waves. The sensor displays flickered and distorted, but the ship's systems held firm. Day-Wan flew by instruments alone, trusting Vorath to guide him through the worst of it. "Contacts lost," Vorath reported. "The enemy cannot see us." "But we can't see them either." "Correct. We are functionally blind." Day-Wan felt the ship shudder as they hit a particularly intense pocket of radiation. He compensated with the attitude thrusters, keeping them level. This was dangerous. One mistake, and they could tear the ship apart. But it was the only way. "Vorath, can you predict where they'll be based on their last known course?" "I can calculate probable positions with 67% accuracy." "That'll have to be good enough. When I say so, take us up above the storms. We'll have maybe 5 seconds before they get a lock on us. I need to make them count." "Understood." They flew through the chaos for another 3 minutes. Day-Wan counted in his head, visualizing the enemy positions. The Night's Edge would be on their left, probably climbing to get above the storms. The Burning Talon would be on their right, trying to flank. Standard patrol tactics. "Now," Day-Wan said. The Stormbreaker shot upward, breaking through the storm layer like a shark breaching water. Day-Wan's eyes snapped to the sensors. There, the Night's Edge, exactly where he predicted, less than 2 kilometers away. Its shields were still adjusting from the radiation. He fired. The Stormbreaker's main cannons spoke, and coherent light lanced across space. The enemy cruiser's shields flared, held for a second, then collapsed. The follow-up shots punched through the hull, tearing into the engine compartment. The Night's Edge went dark, tumbling end over end. "One down," Vorath said. "Where's the other one?" Scanning. "Contact. Burning Talon has broken off and is retreating." Daewon watched the tactical display as the second cruiser ran at full speed, broadcasting distress signals on every frequency. He could pursue. He could destroy it. But that would mean more time in the system, more chances for reinforcements to arrive. "Let it go," he decided. "Plot a jump. Anywhere but here." "Jump calculations complete. Ready when you are." Daewon took one last look at HFY 4 on his display. The planet where he had been left to die. The planet where he had found something worth living for. He would never see it again. "Goodbye," he whispered. Then louder, "Jump!" Space twisted. Reality bent. The stars stretched into lines and then they were gone, racing through faster-than-light space toward somewhere else, anywhere else. Daewon slumped in his seat, adrenaline draining away and leaving him shaking. His first battle, he had won. He was alive. "Status report," he said. "Hull integrity at 96%, shields recharging, ammunition at 82%, all critical systems functioning normally." "And the Night's Edge?" "Crippled but not destroyed. Its crew should survive if they are rescued promptly." Daewon nodded. He had disabled the ship, not murdered its crew. That mattered to him, even if they had been trying to kill him. He wasn't a soldier. He wasn't a killer. He was just someone trying to stay alive. But across Gorvath space, the news was already spreading. A human, alone, commanding an ancient warship, had defeated an Imperial patrol. It seemed impossible. It seemed like a lie. But the Burning Talon's sensor logs didn't lie. Neither did the wreckage of the Night's Edge. Commander Valthos received the report in his office aboard the Eternal Reach. He read it 3 times, his face growing darker with each pass. The human he had exiled. The mechanic he had condemned to die slowly in the desert. That human had found a warship and escaped. Valthos crushed the data pad in his hand. This was unacceptable. This was an insult to the Empire and a personal humiliation. He would see that human dead if it cost him his entire fleet. He issued orders: find the Stormbreaker, find the human, and when found, destroy them both. But in the depths of space, racing away from everything he had known, Daewon allowed himself a small smile. He had escaped. He had fought and won. And for the first time in 14 months, he felt something he hadn't felt since before his exile. He felt free. 3 months after escaping HFY 4, Daewon had become a ghost. He struck Gorvath's supply convoys on the edges of their empire and vanished before reinforcements could arrive. He targeted military transports carrying weapons and equipment, never civilian vessels. He was precise, careful, and increasingly effective. The Gorvath called him the Desert Shadow, a name that amused him given where he had come from. But success brought attention. The bounty on his head had grown to levels that made bounty hunters salivate. The Gorvath Navy had assigned 3 task forces specifically to hunt him down. And Commander Valthos had made destroying him a personal mission, pouring resources into the search. Daewon lived in the Stormbreaker now. He slept in the pilot's seat more often than not, always ready to jump at a moment's notice. He ate ration bars and drank recycled water. He spoke to no one but Vorath, and the AI, while respectful, was not exactly companionship. The loneliness was worse than HFY 4 had been. At least on the planet, he had known he was alone. Now, surrounded by billions of inhabited worlds, he was more isolated than ever. He was wanted. He was hunted. He was utterly cut off from everything. On the 107th day after his escape, something changed. Daewon was hiding in an asteroid field, running silent to avoid detection, when his communication system picked up a tight beam transmission. Someone was trying to contact him directly, using old Gorvath military frequencies that shouldn't have been known to anyone outside the Empire. Vorath, analyze this. Transmission origin is a small freighter, human design, operating under false registry. Signal is encoded but not hostile. They are requesting communication. A human ship. Daewon's heart raced. He hadn't spoken to another human since his exile. Part of him wanted to ignore it. This could be a trap. But another part, the part that ached with loneliness, wanted desperately to answer. Open a channel, he decided. But keep weapons ready. The view screen flickered, and a man's face appeared. He was young, maybe late 20s, with short black hair and sharp eyes. He smiled when he saw Daewon. "So the rumors are true," the man said. "A human flying a Gorvath warship. My name is Hyun Woo. I captain the freighter Lucky Star, and I've been looking for you." "Why?" Daewon asked, not lowering his guard. "Because you've done something no one thought possible. You've made the Gorvath bleed. You've shown them that humans aren't just slaves and mechanics. We can fight back." "I'm just trying to survive." "Maybe that's how it started," Hyun Woo said. "But it's become something bigger. Do you know what happens every time you hit a Gorvath convoy? The news spreads. Humans across a dozen colonies hear about it. They hear about one of their own standing up to the Empire. It gives them hope." "Hope is dangerous," Daewon said. "Hope gets people killed. So does giving up. Look, I'm not here to lecture you. I'm here to make an offer. There are others like me, humans who are tired of bowing to the Gorvath. We're organizing, building a resistance. We need people with skills, we need ships, and we need a symbol." "I'm not a symbol. I'm just a mechanic." "You're more than that now, whether you like it or not." Hyun Woo leaned forward. "I'm not asking you to join us today. I'm just asking you to think about it. You can't run forever. Eventually they'll corner you. But if you're with us, you'd have allies, support, a chance to actually hurt them instead of just annoying them." Daewon wanted to refuse. He wanted to cut the transmission and jump away. But something stopped him. Maybe it was the loneliness. Maybe it was the way Hyun Woo looked at him, not with awe, but with respect, like an equal. "How did you find me?" he asked. "We have people in the right places. Gorvath aren't the only ones who can gather intelligence." Hyun Woo smiled. "Look, I'll leave you with contact codes. Encrypted. If you ever need anything or if you change your mind, reach out. No pressure, no judgment." The transmission ended. Daewon sat in silence, staring at the empty screen. Vorath spoke quietly. "That was unexpected." "Yeah," Daewon agreed. "Will you contact them?" "I don't know." But the seed had been planted. Over the next few weeks, as Daewon continued his raids, he found himself thinking about Hyun Woo's words, about resistance, about allies, about not being alone anymore. It was tempting, dangerously tempting. Then the Gorvath made their move. Daewon received what appeared to be a distress call from a civilian transport under attack by pirates. It was in a system he knew, on a route he had used before. Every instinct told him it was a trap, but the call included video of families, children, begging for help. He couldn't ignore it. Even if it was a trap, he had to check. That was the difference between him and the Gorvath. They would let innocents die. He couldn't. "Vorath, plot a course to those coordinates. I must advise against this action. The probability of ambush is 91%. "I know. Do it anyway." They jumped to the system and immediately knew it was wrong. The sensors showed 6 Gorvath cruisers and a carrier battle group waiting in formation. The civilian transport was there, but it was clearly bait, operated by remote control. And at the center of the formation was Commander Valthos himself, commanding the carrier. "I have you now, human," Valthos's voice came over the open channel. "Surrender the stolen vessel, and I will make your death quick." Daywan didn't answer. His hands moved across the controls, bringing weapons online and shields to maximum. 6 cruisers and a carrier. He had faced long odds before, but this was suicide. His mind raced, looking for options, finding none. Then his sensors detected new contacts, ships dropping out of faster-than-light speed all around the battlefield. Human ships, dozens of them, freighters with welded-on weapons, mining vessels with improvised missile launchers. They were a ragtag fleet, no match for Gorvath military vessels. But they were here. Hyunwoo's voice came through on the emergency channel. "Thought you could use some help. Hope you don't mind the company." Daywan felt something break open in his chest. Not alone. He wasn't alone anymore. "Vorath, target the carrier's command bridge. Full power. That will require us to break through their defensive line. We will take heavy damage. Then we'd better move fast." The battle was chaos. The human ships swarmed the Gorvath formation, their uncoordinated attacks forcing the cruisers to split their attention. It wasn't elegant. It wasn't tactical. But it was effective. Daywan pushed the Stormbreaker through the gap they created, taking hits on his shields but not slowing down. The carrier loomed ahead, massive and menacing. Its point defense systems fired at him, but he juked and weaved, coming in at an angle they couldn't cover. He locked weapons on the bridge and fired everything. The bridge section exploded in a brilliant flash. The carrier went dark, its command structure severed, but the victory cost him. The Stormbreaker's shields failed. Hull breaches vented atmosphere. Systems overloaded. Alarms screamed. Daywan fought to keep the ship stable as he limped away from the carrier. "Multiple hull breaches," Vorath reported. "Life support failing. Weapons offline. Engine power at 20%. "Can we jump?" "Negative. Jump drive damaged." The Gorvath cruisers, seeing the carrier disabled and their commander dead, hesitated. Then they began to retreat, jumping away one by one. The human fleet had won, but barely. Half their ships were crippled or destroyed. The price had been high. Hyunwoo's ship pulled alongside the Stormbreaker. "We're sending a repair crew over. Hold tight." Over the next hours, as human engineers worked to patch the worst of the damage, Daywan sat in his battered pilot seat and realized something fundamental had changed. He had spent so long fighting alone, surviving alone, that he had forgotten what it meant to have allies, to have people who would risk everything to help him. When the repairs were complete enough to fly, the human fleet gathered at a hidden station in a remote nebula. It was small, barely more than a few connected modules, but it was home to maybe 100 people. Humans who had left the Gorvath Empire, who had chosen freedom over safety. Daywan walked through the station, still wearing his flight suit, and people stared. Some reached out to touch his shoulder. Some simply nodded. A few saluted. To them, he was exactly what Hyunwoo had said. A symbol. Proof that humans could stand against the Gorvath and win. Hyunwoo found him in the observation deck, looking out at the stars. "So, still think you're just a mechanic?" "I don't know what I am anymore," Daywan admitted. "Then let me tell you what I see. I see someone who survived impossible odds. Someone who learned to fly a warship alone. Someone who fought an empire and made them afraid. You're a pilot, Daywan, a warrior. And we need you. I'm not a leader. Maybe not, but you are a teacher. You know things about Gorvath ships, tactics, technology. You can train others. You can help us build a real fleet, not just improvised weapons strapped to civilian transports. We can't beat the Gorvath Empire. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But we can make them respect us. We can carve out places where humans are free." Daywan looked at the people working in the station. Engineers repairing ships, pilots studying navigation charts, families trying to build lives away from Gorvath control. They weren't soldiers. They were just people who wanted to be free, like him. "All right," he said. I'll help. I'll train your pilots. I'll share what I know about the Stormbreaker and Gorvath systems. But I'm not staying grounded. I still fly. Hyunwoo grinned. I wouldn't dream of keeping you planetside. The Desert Shadow needs to keep flying. The Gorvath need to keep remembering that humans don't give up. Over the following months, something remarkable happened. The small resistance grew. Daewon trained 10 pilots, then 20, then 50. They weren't as skilled as he was, but they learned. Human ships, retrofitted with salvaged Gorvath technology, began running missions, supply raids, rescue operations, hit-and-run attacks that the Empire couldn't ignore. The Gorvath still controlled vast territories. They still had overwhelming military superiority. But they had learned a hard lesson. Humanity, dismissed and underestimated, had found its teeth, and they would not be prey anymore. Daewon stood in the hangar of the Resistance station, looking at the Stormbreaker. The ship bore scars now, patched armor and replaced panels. It would never be pristine again. But it was his, and it still flew. Ready for another run? Hyunwoo asked, walking up beside him. Always, Daewon replied. He climbed into the cockpit, settled into the pilot's seat that had become more comfortable than any bed, and powered up the systems. Vorath's voice greeted him. Good morning, pilot. Where are we going today? Wherever they need us, Daewon said, and flew toward the stars.